They've always got something that I want to check out. I've never been to, interacted with street books when there wasn't at least one book, if not three, that I wanted to check out, and sometimes I got to hold myself back.
You come here, they go out and find the book for you that you want to read. Because like she just told me the Harold Robinson book that she got for me. I've been to 4 different libraries and they don't have the books. And she ended up finding the book for me.
They go above and beyond what everyone else really would do.
She has books at the public library, sometimes doesn't have it all. And so you have to order those or request those and request that they purchase them.
Like some people don't like or don't have library cards, so they can't go to the library and get books. They can come here and get it.
If you want to return it, you can when you're done with it, but if not, you can keep it. And they're good people that way.
And they listen. All the people that work there, they listen. And they really, really do kind of peg people pretty well once they just pay attention to what you read. We all talk about books and pass them around to each other now. So it's kind of put a little cohesiveness in the community on that.
Street books is like the glue, like the same kind of glue they use to hold books together. And it brings people together and ideas together.
Growing up, I never really had the community around books. But the more I just started to, grow up and move different places and meet different people, I realized that, books are often, I find, like I said, the gateway, because that gives you the knowledge, to start to be part of a community or to find the people that you need to find, because you find the book first.
Through the books is the icebreaker, if you will, and then things move on from there.
Some of the the street cleanup guys have come and asked me, hey, is this your book? When they find it near one of my camp spots or something, if we have to move, they'll bring me back books, even if I've already read them. A lot of times I take them and leave them in place, but I've given them to a lot of my friends here. It brings us together.
One of my favorite parts, like I said, is just seeing people every week, registering them as, more complex individuals than just somebody that you see on the street.
In general, it is something that kind of like a mote in our eye that we try to push away. And so we're trying to do the opposite, say, let's not ignore these people, let's take them in, let's treat them like neighbors.
They don't even judge people. I mean, she didn't know me from Adam. I could have been some crazy person, but she came up to me, hey, you want a book to read? And man, like I said, it really touched me because she saw a human being.
I've been a reader since I was a kid, and so to me, any type of a book, no matter what you read, whenever you read, you're always going to learn something.
I love to read, and a little more. Any books they tell me to read, they got good taste in books. Well, they've really been helping me out, especially myself, keeping me focused on reading. Before I met these people, I couldn't keep a book at all.
Books were my refuge. They were my haven. I could get away from all of it, just go into a book. And I started actually writing because of some of the books I read.
You can write anything if you go, how did they do it? And then how can I find that voice in my way?
I was 5 credits short from graduating high school, but since I've been here homeless and living on the streets and stuff, I've been picking books up and slowly reading, learning how to read better and stuff. I always also carry a dictionary with me.
People that have been inspired to do something really amazing, a lot of times they got inspired by a book. And Street Books opens that up for people like me too, and that's really cool.
And I got this here today. Uncle Tom's Cabin. I like John Steinbeck. I like J.D. Salinger.
Along the Grand Trunk Road.
Wallace Stegner, Women on the Wall.
Dean Koontz books, Clive Cussler books.
Louis L'Amour, Western.
The Little Prince by, it's Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
It opens your mind to other things. It makes you able to accept other concepts from other people.
I'm learning things. People are picking up books. Dostoevsky goes off the shelf in 5 seconds.
It's education. We educate the whole world. We're starting at the grassroots level, and you just don't get any more grassroots than this.
I just hope people could open up. If they got books they want to donate, call them. Donate books to them. It's just like Christmas. Christmas to the homeless person.
Street Books is absolutely awesome. It's fantastic. Support and donate to Street Books.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to say before I begin that it's touching to watch that video. It's a few years old, and Mike, who begins the documentary with the Canada shirt on, passed away. He was a longtime patron, and actually when he realized how sick he was, he asked Diana to be with him, and she was able to be with him in the hospital when he passed. And on a lighter note, Carrie, who has the glasses and talks about the street sweepers bringing her books, has been a librarian for us now for some years, and she's doing great, and she's indoors with her husband. So 2 notes there. So thank you so much to Caitlin and to everyone at Creative Mornings for this invitation. We're so glad to be here. My name is Laura Moulton, and I'm a writer and teacher in Portland. I do collage and postal art projects, and I have a monthly art and writing newsletter called Truth and Dare. And I'm also the executive director of Street Books, and that's why we're here today. As Caitlin mentioned, the theme cycle is appropriate for us because we're a nonprofit library that uses bicycle libraries to post up around the city 5 days a week, offering books, reading glasses, and survival supplies like Narcan and wound care for people living outside and at the margins. We've been operating for more than 14 years, and since we're gathered at an event called Creative Mornings, it's worth mentioning that Street Books began as a creative experiment in 2011. So Portland has a very, solid bike culture and is such a literary city. When I began to scheme on this, it was hard to believe that it didn't already exist. But the Street Books Library was created for people who didn't typically get invited to participate in arts and culture, and who faced barriers to the mainstream county library, which at the time required proof of address and an ID to get a library card. They don't anymore. We like to think we nudged them a little bit, but we are a small nonprofit. Thank you very much. You never know what'll get claps, you know? So I got funding, initial kind of seed money from the Regional Arts and Culture Council, and I launched what I thought would be a 3-month art project. We posted up twice a week in different parts of the city, and suddenly people had a library that met them where they were and where they could gather regularly for conversations about books and about life. We learned people's names and took requests, returning the following week to bring a library patron of Stephen King or a Nietzsche or a book about dog training. We learned the stories of our library patrons and built relationships so that we too became invested in them being okay. We also got curious about why they were living out there in the first place. It turns out 40 years of disinvestment in affordable housing by the federal government, combined with soaring housing and rent prices, has created a pretty untenable situation for so many people across the country. So Street Books as a creative art project has evolved into a community on the street that has become a known presence and a part of the story of our city. We signed on to an amicus brief for the Grants Pass Supreme Court case and joined a town hall where our patrons gave testimony to the mayor. We've written op-eds for newspapers, and our patrons have shared their art and poetry at Street Books events. It turns out there was plenty of art and culture on the street already. We just had to show up for it. This is a room full of incredibly creative people. You are makers and designers and artists. You have creative skills to lend, and you already know what it's like to conceive an idea and then labor to make it real. And I think this work is what we are called to do now, to aim our best skills at some of the intractable problems our city faces, and to summon the world we want into being, one that recognizes the worth and dignity of every person, and that ensures they have a safe place to live and thrive. Today, we're happy to share the various ways creativity has informed everything we do at Street Books. I'll read with my co-author, Ben Hodgson, from the book we've created about the project, and then we'll hear from 3 of our librarians who curate the bike libraries to their patrons' literature tastes and who themselves are great writers, as you'll hear in a few minutes. So thanks again for coming so much, and thank you for your support. So Hodge and I are going to share a couple of vignettes from our book, Loners, The Making of a Street Library, which Caitlin graciously set up, helped us set up outside for sale today. So once you hear, you can decide whether you're in or not. But this is very exciting because we went with a local publisher, Perfect Day Publishing. They do one kind of beautiful book a year. They're kind of small batch as a publisher. And we sold out our initial print run of 4,000 thanks to many people in Portland. And we were also able to make this available for free at our street library. And so that's been one of the coolest things is people living outside or recently living outside, reading it and giving us the okay, like, I think you got it right, especially Hodge's part. And briefly, I met Hodge in 2011 when I was out running that first shift that June, and he was living at the time in Old Town, knew very much what it was like to live outside, and came and kind of inspected the library. And so this book is the story of how we meet, how he notices what I don't have on the library, which is P.G. Wodehouse at the time. Scolded me on that. I've since read Wodehouse. And then this is about the way we forged a friendship, the way Hodge began to be a part of the Street Books Library. And so it's been a very cool experience to be able to travel with this book and go in and out of high schools and community centers, retirement places, just a full range of human experience. And Hodge will lead off with the first little vignette. And we're going to share about 4 total and do back and forth. Take it away.
Okay, I notice it's printed on the screen behind me. I'll try and move my shadow to unblock it a little bit. And here we go. 3-day notice. Soft landings. That's what I'm all about. But this was not going to be a soft landing. This was going to be the hardest landing I ever landed on. It's a well-known story. A man ends up downtown on Skid Row, starts hitting the bottle, and never comes back. But this was much worse. When I hit the streets, I stopped drinking. Now you know that's a desperate man who feels so bad that he stops drinking, like a country song in reverse. There wasn't anything to party about, and I didn't need no damn weed to heighten the sensation of how lousy I was feeling. I spent a good deal of time wondering what had gone wrong and how come I didn't see it coming, then realized that I had seen it coming for nearly 12 weeks. I remembered how I'd gradually dissolved into panic and collapse, scrambling around trying to find a job, even though in the back of my mind I could feel the time running out faster than I could catch up. Then one day a 3-day notice was taped to the door, and all I could do was pack up and go. I was so out of it I couldn't even bring myself to give the key back to the manager and tell them I was leaving, and the things I left behind: Sid's briefcase, Dave's doctor bag, Brian's record collection, and my photo album. Silly sentimental attachments? Of course, in the one sense, and in the other sense, a damn disgrace. Those were the last things I had of my brothers. With a change of clothes and a couple of blankets, I shipped off to the Baltic and Mediterranean of Portland, which is Old Town, just 2 squares away from the Pearl. I was in it up to my neck. Everything had piled up on me, like I was buried under a huge stinking pile of garbage. I was going to have to try and dig my way out of it, like some mole. That was about as fine as my finer points got for a good long while, till I got settled in, finding some place to sleep every night, at first near the Portland Rescue Mission, sticking close to the crowd, carving out my space every night, up and down the sidewalk, maybe near the door where the guy that talks to himself stays, or down around the corner where this girl walks back and forth making chicken noises. If that didn't work, I could take my chances under a bridge and try it in sleep while some guy that's 5/4 drunk would commence belly aching about the world in general. I'm not kidding about the chicken girl. I was trying to sleep one night while this hopelessly drugged out woman was pacing around making chicken noises. I finally got up to move, and I told the 2 guys next to me, she's going to do this all night. I saw the guys the next morning, and they told me that they should have moved too, because it was just like I said. The chicken girl had gone on for 8 doggone hours with the chicken noises. Hey, better living through chemistry, right?
The road. As I passed by Skidmore Fountain, a firefighter named Fred, strawberry blonde hair and freckles, leaned over the fence at the fire station and asked what I was doing. "It's a street library," I said. "How do you decide what books to offer?" he asked. "I try to have a little bit of everything," I told him. "I understand that a man living outside might not want to unwind with a Jane Austen novel." Fred grinned and leaned in closer. "I am such a fan of Jane Austen," he said. "Don't tell the guys here," and he hooked his thumb back toward the fire station, "but I've read every one of her books." I had decided to use an old school card and pocket system in each book so people could sign the books out. I also had little street books cards to issue each person, on which I'd write their name and my location and hours. The book bike was heavy on the uphill, and I was relieved when I arrived at the park blocks for the second library shift in Southwest Portland, near the Art Museum. I stopped under a canopy of trees to avoid the drizzle. Once the brakes were set, I pulled out the drawer and propped it up with a wooden block. Wiping raindrops from the books with a cloth, I took stock of my surroundings. The square drew many different kinds of people: scrappers with their skateboards and dogs on hemp leashes, gauges in ears, tattoos, pierced eyebrows, tongues, cheeks. A white-haired man, beard yellowed by nicotine, sold homemade wooden walking sticks. Guys with oversized backpacks at the north end of the square sat smoking and talking. The kids with dogs sprawled on the grass not far from me. People wandered through from the nearby farmer's market, carrying baguettes and flowers, leading small children or balancing on rollerblades. I confess I was nervous. What if nobody out here really wanted a book? There was also a small voice in me that said, "Really? A book? Somebody's been sleeping on a piece of cardboard on the concrete for months, and what you're going to offer is a paperback?" It had occurred to me that a person who had been on the road for months or years might not enjoy reading The Grapes of Wrath. My first patron wasn't a patron at all, but a security guard named A.B. He studied my contraption, scanned the titles in the library, and then asked for my permit. "I don't think I need a permit if I'm not selling anything," I told him. He chewed on this information for a few minutes, circled the bike, and then shrugged. He rested his hand on the edge of the bike box and settled into a comfortable lean. "I get notions to read stuff," he said. "Like books about secret government doings and everything we're not supposed to know." But he said he rarely finished a book before getting distracted on account of his busy brain. Just when I began to wonder if his uniformed presence at the library might hurt my business, he wished me luck and pushed off. With A.B. gone, I screwed up my courage and approached the group of young people sprawled on the grass. "Hey guys, I'm operating a library for people who live outside. You should come have a look at the books if you like." I handed out a street books card to each person. Thomas was one of the first from the group to amble over and inspect my collection. Up close, I saw that he had sea blue eyes that were both spooky and beautiful, and his chin and neck were tattooed with dark blue designs. "I take requests if you have any," I said. He studied me for a minute. "I've been meaning to read Cold Mountain by Charles Fraser." Whatever I might have supposed about a young man wearing mostly black with tattoos on his face and neck and gauges in his ears, it wasn't that he'd been meaning to read a retelling of the Odyssey set during the American Civil War. I realized I needed to keep my mind open and make no assumptions about what a patron might want to read or about who they were. Nothing was a given. Each person was a walking secret history. It was up to them how much they revealed.
Flying signs. I wasn't crazy exactly, but had a diminished capacity from depression. Sick is a good word for it, and creepy. Helpless, pathetic, contemptible. I was a regular walking thesaurus, a litany of mental health issues. riding on the bus, trying not to sit too close to anyone, hunched inside myself as close as I could squeeze, which was completely ineffective as a prophylactic measure, but the best I could come up with under the circumstances. The first few weeks being outside, I suffered alienation from the people I'd left behind, as well as from the outdoorsmen I encountered on the streets. I was also paranoid. The man on the bus was not staring at me, but I was pretty sure he was. Do we see a pattern emerging here? Let's review. I had finding a bathroom anxiety, riding a bus anxiety, finding a place to sleep anxiety, getting a seat anxiety, wet feet anxiety. Most mental health professionals will confirm that depression and anxiety kind of go hand in hand. Some would agree that with serious long-term depression, psychosis is just around the corner. Or was that it around the last corner? I don't really understand that stuff. What I do know is that things can get pretty weird. But for those who are handling it well enough, being outdoors is not as pitiful as we fear it will be. One can adapt to nearly anything. One can also go nearly nuts from the shock of it before making the adjustment. I wasn't one to fly a panhandling sign, but one I would have tried is Vietnam vet, still crazy after that 1 year. I found some sidewalk space up in the Pearl for a while. The sidewalks are just a little softer there, the spare change a little jinglier. But it turns out you have to bring designer cardboard with you, or the other homeless people look down on you. Imagine the snooty nasal drone. Frankly, it was embarrassing, the cardboard that those people were sleeping on. Funny thought, though, that some of the homeless do look down on other homeless people. Must be some sort of basic human need to be able to look down on someone. And homeless people serve an important function in society. We give everybody else someone to look down on. Maybe we should start charging for that. It was, in fact, the only sign I ever flew for about 10 minutes. Feel superior to me for 5 minutes, 35 cents. All day past $3. I didn't get any change, but I did get a laugh. Be the spare change you want to see in my world. I never flew that one either.
Okay, I have one more and then Hodge will finish with a short one. Lucidity. I had a moment of lucidity on the corner of 6th and Davis, outside Sisters of the Road. Diana and I set up the library, watching a man remove his shirt and sit in a straight-backed lotus position. He was facing the sun, newly risen over Old Town, with his blonde gray hair feathered back 70s style and a small stereo at his knee. Further down the sidewalk, someone was sleeping on a piece of cardboard. Nearby, several people sat at the curb and ran interference between two dogs that periodically barked and snarled at each other. 70s man was blasting songs and singing along. His music became our soundtrack as we loaned books to patrons, moving from foot to foot, shimmying a little. On the bike library that day, we had a short story collection in Spanish by Junot Diaz, Monster by Walter Dean Myers, and Jane Smiley's 1,000 Acres. We had some Alice Walker and Tim O'Brien, a copy of Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller, marked with a note, "Hold for Barbie." There were so many stories behind the stories on the bike library. How Jane Smiley wrote 1,000 Acres as an allegory of King Lear to try and take tyranny down a peg. How Junot Diaz wrote his semi-autobiographical stories about his life as a Dominican immigrant and went on to publish a piece in The New Yorker about the abuse he'd suffered as a kid and how he now faces allegations of harassing and abusing women and misusing his power as a gatekeeper. I surveyed the books and wondered if one should simply stay faithful to the stories inside the cover of each book, or was it necessary to also learn and know the stories that circle around the authors? In this crew, was it enough to say that Walter Dean Myers wrote more than 100 great books and never harassed anyone? or that Tim O'Brien brought a new literary quality to writing about the Vietnam War. A girl in a long coat with faux fur edges tapped her cigarette and asked me if we had anything about the occult. She moved her hips to the music, taking puffs and blowing the smoke straight up. Alan didn't check out a book, but instead told us that unfortunately, he'd scored so high on an intelligence test that he was clinically insane. He pulled out 2 laminated 4-leaf clovers from his wallet and told me to choose one. When I asked where he finds them, he told me about a place in Northwest, swearing me to secrecy. He leaned in close. You don't just walk up to a 4-leaf clover. You have to walk by with soft eyes, not be aggressive, then it will reach out to you. It finds you first. Meanwhile, the radio started to play Whitney Houston's version of I Will Always Love You. We kept on checking out books, but now we were singing along while we filled out the library cards. When I looked up, I saw a kid walk by with an oversized rucksack on his back and a loping dog on a rope. He was lip-syncing to the chorus. The music grew louder, and I turned to find that 70s man had crossed the street to join us. He'd put on his shirt and a baseball cap and was carrying the little speaker under his arm. His pale white feet were bare, and he stood on his tiptoes, circling in a dance. Everyone danced now, and the words to the next song were familiar. Why do you build me up, buttercup baby, just to let me down, let me down. I recognized the song, but I didn't know until I looked it up later that it was a recording by a band called The Foundations, a British soul band from the late 60s composed of West Indians, white British, and Sri Lankan musicians, a hodgepodge of different cultures and colors and ages and life experiences, a lot like the group of us out here. We constituted our own interesting mix, a unique combo of dancers and non-dancers, book lovers and non-readers. There were those of us with plans, with tethers to the day in the form of a schedule or a place to be, kids coming home from school, a sofa with books piled on it, a cat looking for attention. And there were those whose plans consisted of returning to a spot near Skidmore Fountain or Forest Park or the waterfront, to a loading dock or an alley, whose priorities were to protect a backpack and bedroll, life goals winnowed down to simply staying alive, warm enough, fed enough. But for the length of a conversation about books on a street corner, these differences fell away. For whatever reason, there were sparks inside that day. The magic came at that precise moment on that precise morning with its particular slant of granular late autumn light and the shadow that an oversized backpack casts. When I looked around slowly, I saw that it was like we were all on the set of a musical, inside that final scene where everything prior has built to this last song and dance. Everyone's spinning in their own orbit, yet in sync with one another. A garbage collector with his trash can dance moves, pedestrians stepping in unison, arms suddenly linked, and the shopkeeper emerging with her push broom, sweeping in time to the music. Thanks.
GQ. At first, she looked like any other street librarian, complete with the cards in the books and post-it notes and paper clips, bicycle parked and little shelf pulled out displaying the collection. I graciously overlooked the complete lack of any Woodhouse titles on her shelves, but did mention in passing that a well-maintained library does require some attention. Only too late when I learned that here was a teacher turned recalcitrant schoolchild that refuses to do her assigned reading. But I didn't know that yet. I'd arrived in my ratty-looking coat, scruffy beard, hair going every which way like I just stepped off the cover of Gentleman's Quarterly and then into a threshing machine. The way I must have looked to Laura at the street library, it easily could have been straight out of Woodhouse. Describing one of Bertie's lovesick acquaintances, he writes, "He looked like a character in one of those Russian novels, trying to decide whether to murder several relatives before hanging himself in the barn."
Thank you so much. We're going to do our part 3, and briefly you'll hear from each librarian, and then we'd love to answer any questions you might have. Josh is going to lead off.
Hey everybody, my name is Josh. I think all three of us, John, Diana, and I, are going to read from these shift reports that we write every day. We run 13 shifts a week, and for each shift, the librarians write a report so that everybody else in the organization can keep abreast of what's happening. These are not like works that are edited for a book, right? These are like quick one-off parts of our job, but it gives like a nice glimpse of what it's like on the street. I feel like we're running kind of late, so I might just abridge mine and go kind of quickly, because the last thing I want to do is bore you all. But first, I might define a couple terms in our shift report, just because everybody might not be familiar. On Thursdays, I do a shift at Blanchet House in Pear. Blanchet House is in Old Town, and it's among other things, it's a soup kitchen, for lack of a better term. It serves thousands of meals a day to folks. Pear is a youth arts mentorship drop-in for homeless youth under 25. I also mentioned Joe's, which is the Joint Office of Homeless Services, which gives us a small amount of free supplies, but cut off tents and tarps, which I reference. And I mentioned naloxone, which is, I guess, better known as the brand name Narcan. It's an opioid antagonist they use to reverse overdoses. We distribute this year it'll be between 3,500 and 4,000 doses of that to people who use drugs on the street. But yeah, I think I'll abridge this report. Busy day out there in Old Town today. We got absolutely swamped when we showed up at Blanchet. People came at us from all directions needing supplies, while a guy howled down the block and some others had a verbal spat in the street behind us. Much of that first leg of the shift was a whirlwind of both new and familiar faces, but later it sort of mellowed out into a steady stream with folks hanging back and taking turns. A few things I remember. C brought us some books, as usual, but he was bent out of shape at the thought that some people are taking them and selling them at Powell's, so he wrote "Not for sale" in Sharpie on all the edges, then told me not to get any more tattoos and took off. One of the books that C donated was Nabokov's Lolita, which we've always been loath to carry just because of the conversations it inevitably evokes, and sure enough, M took the unintentional bait and got kind of weird. B talked to me about trying and failing over and over again to get into a housing program and off the streets. She asked if we could refer her for help. I passed the info to Diana, who's going to reach out to D. I hope we can help her somehow. She's been out there for a long time and seems truly over it. On a side note, she moved into an apartment yesterday. Y was wearing an all-pink matched outfit that looked fly. Another guy named D was wearing a puke green The Grinch pajama set and got stoked on some Forgotten Realms novels. R refused a pair of glasses because they were red. I found him some black ones, and swore that when we met a few years ago, my hair was brown. Someone else chimed in that the cause of rapid graying is a broken heart. I'm going to skip ahead just to the end for time's sake. It was a fine and fortifying day. All in all, we gave out 46 books, 12 pairs of glasses, 11 naloxone kits, and a bunch of coloring books, comics, wipes, batteries, socks, and whatever else we could round up. We also got 3 returns and gave out the last tent we will ever receive from Jose. It was unceremonious, and we refused all sentimentality. I won't rest until we distribute a final tent crafted out of the tanned hide of Renee Gonzalez, and in which nobody will need to live.
Hey, I'm Diana. It's really hard to follow Josh's shift reports because they are every week the most beautiful thing I get to read. So thank you, Josh. I am the community outreach person and a longtime street librarian at Street Books. I've been with Laura for, well, most of the time. This will be my 13th year as a street librarian. I'm going to read really quick. Well, I'm going to cut some of mine too, I think, but I do want to define another term in here, which is about the sweeps. So I use that term, and I don't know if everybody knows what that means, but it's the city policy of moving people from where they are based on a complaint usually lodged by someone else. And just to put a little perspective, the sweeps they've been going on for a long time, but they've really, really ramped up in the last couple of years, particularly this year. And they're usually done by a company called Rapid Response, which last year received a 7-year contract not to exceed $37 million. And that's our tax money. So that's just something for everybody to think about when you're thinking about your taxes. There's also, I will direct you to a wonderful article done by ProPublica, the news source that we helped with, about what people lose during the sweeps. And if you look on our website under media, I think there's a link to that. And if there's not, there will be really soon. It just came out. So, and with that, I will move forward. My shift log comes from a Wednesday shift where we set up at Trinity Cathedral in Northwest. We're there for a couple of hours. We then go to William Temple House, also in Northwest, for an hour. And then we go and do a shift that's unlike anything we do the rest of the week, which is a rolling around the former Greyhound station at Union Station in Old Town. And it's really different because we don't set up the library and stay in one place. We move. And we get to be in relationship with some of the most vulnerable people living on our streets right now. And I think it's a very, very important shift that we do. We check out books. We give out a lot of coloring books. But we also give out as many supplies as we can come up with, and we never have enough. And tons of naloxone and lots of wound care supplies. But we also are building these really deep relationships with people that generally aren't building relationships with other people in Portland. So anyway, so this is my quick shift report. Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. We set up in the sliver of sunlight at Trinity Cathedral today, hopeful the rains wouldn't push us back under the tent, and hope prevailed. We were dry the rest of the day, even with the ominous sky threatening rain, and the shift was like the day, beautiful and tinged with a looming presence of suffering. The sweeps roll on. At Trinity, Bea appeared in her wheelchair. She had just been swept and talked about having to leave everything because there was no way to carry it on her wheelchair. She said, crying, "I feel like human garbage." We spent a long time with her, and I want to think that she felt a little better, a little seen and cared for when we parted. There's so little we can offer someone to mitigate the abject cruelty happening again and again. But being really present with them, offering honest recognition of our connection, feels like something. And here's some other things that happened. Kay arrived from Rosehaven, raving about the presentation by Ed Johnson in the Oregon Law Center about Johnson v. Grants Pass. She said, "You wouldn't believe who was at Rosehaven today. The guys who took the Grants Pass case to the Supreme Court. It was like being around movie stars." Then she proceeded to give a play-by-play about the state of the law affecting unhoused people. It was impressive. I sent Ed a message telling him what a celebrity he is down in Northwest. Kay also reminded us that it's Sexy Day at Rahab's sister this week. That means they'll be distributing vibrators. We made a note to stock more batteries going forward. I'm going to skip the next section and only say that S and Buster, the street dog, are now in housing. We were able to find it for them and help them, and it's really wonderful. So I'll skip that. William Temple House was slow and steady. Kay exhibited mad bike packing skills, loading multiple bags of groceries, dressed all in pearls and a miniskirt, while giving us a history lesson about the federal excise tax on our phones and the Spanish-American War. The Greyhound rounds were busy. Everything was busy yesterday. We gave out all the supplies we had. We could have given them to a single person who would have been happy to take them all. And we had to return to the garage twice to restock. Rapid response seems to be everywhere, all at once. And the state troopers swooped by like some malevolent birds. No, that's not fair to birds. Like some malevolent wraiths sowing chaos in what could have been a quiet scene. We gave out 45 books, got 6 returned, gave out all the coloring books, at least 13 pairs of glasses, 22 boxes of naloxone, which is 44 doses, so many other survival items, and I won't read the list. Thank you all.
All right. Good job. It's pretty early in the morning. No one's nodded off yet. I've been watching. So good crowd. Good crowd. This is from a Monday shift that I do. I picked this shift because it's pretty typical. And a lot of people ask, like, what kind of books do you give out? Like when they hear about street books, what do you do out there? Like what kind of conversations do you have? And I give out normal books. I have normal conversations. These are people that we're connecting with. And like one of the whole reasons I joined Street Books was because I love books and I knew I could connect to people using books, and that's a big part of the job. And it's just a lot of people looking for connection. And so this is at the Park Blocks outside of the Art Museum, and I am with this is one of my first shifts with a new librarian, Rob. I'd been doing it solo for a little while, and we also chose a new location as well because we're trying to expand and again meet people where they're at. So there's a second shift, kind of kitty corner from the Central Multnomah County Library as well. Another successful Monday on the books. Since it wasn't too hot out yet, the sun was putting everyone in a good mood. So we rolled into the Park Blocks to pretty chill vibes. Saw a lot of the usual crew and gave out some books, took some returns. I got distracted talking about movie and video games with the group waiting for lunch, while Rob took on the more serious conversations of dismantling our government and creating new systems that are beneficial for everyone. So I think there was a pretty good balance overall. We did start out our discussion about whether teleportation ever did exist, if you would be the same person after teleporting, or if the original person would die and there would be a new person at the new point. Many patrons weighed in, but we were not able to reach a consensus. We haven't gotten to the bottom of this yet, so if anyone has thoughts, please share. That did lead to a very long thread, so that was pretty good. We met some new people on our shift, one of which works for the church next door that does the lunches. They came by and talked to Rob about street books for a while, and like everybody who learns about us, thought we were pretty cool. Then we decided to head over to our new spot at 1 and try it out again for the second week. It's right behind the Central Library, so a good location for people who might want books. And we had a pretty good crowd. Lots of people interested in books and lots of people interested in talking about authors and street books in the library. I think the spot's really good. It gets people who know about street books and usually see us in Old Town, but they don't necessarily come to the Park Blocks. So I'm meeting new people, which is great. And again, everyone we met that works at the church giving out food has been really great and excited to hear about street books, so that's been nice too. I was glad Rob was there. We did have someone walking around the blocks going through some crisis, yelling loudly different slurs for about an hour, almost getting in a fight with someone else walking down the street. It was kind of a lot. I may not have felt as safe by myself, but it seemed pretty manageable, and we were able to stay until about 3 o'clock before we took off back to the warehouse. Overall, pretty successful shift. Checked out 13 books, gave out 4 pairs of glasses, 12 bottles of water.
Thank you. Thanks again so much for coming. I think we have about 3 minutes. We're really close to 10, and so I want to respect your time and just draw your attention before we say goodbye to this last slide. Ways to support us. It's enormous. As Caitlin mentioned, we're in the Give Guide. We're a small organization. We've been a 501c3 since 2013. We just got a Give Guide for 3 years, which means we don't have to reapply each year, which is such a boon for a small admin team. But we always loved books and supplies. We have a wish list. Going to streetbooks.org is the best way to find out more about that. And then we just wanted to draw your attention to the Welcome Home Coalition. It's a coalition in Portland that we have recently joined. Carrie, who I mentioned works for us now as a librarian and is indoors, is working on behalf of us as our representative there. And so that's been a very cool thing for her to bring her street smarts and her longtime wisdom to this particular topic and have a voice in our city. But I would check out their call to action at the Welcome Home Coalition's website. And so there are books for sale out there. I'd love to open it up if people have questions. We'll be here for a few minutes, so you're also welcome to come up after.
Can I add one thing? Also, sometimes people are really interested in coming and seeing the shift in action, and I recommend that if you have that interest, get in touch with me. Wednesdays, the shift at Trinity Cathedral that I described is a really great place for people to come. So if you have any interest, reach out to me at Street Books. You can look on our website and come join us for a couple of hours on the street and see us in action, because it's really different than hearing it read about. So thanks.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you.